Okay, let's get this thing started. As a matter of fact, we ought to get after it right now. First of all, let's welcome Wink Martindale.
Grazie, grazie, grazie.
Now, Wink, I got it. Did you say you wanted to do a little something before we got started?
Well, I'd be remiss, plus it's in my marriage contract, if I didn't introduce my wife. Most of you know her, but I always introduce Mrs. Wink Martindale, Ms. Wink Sandy. We just celebrated our 43rd anniversary this past August the 2nd. 43 years with her has not been that easy. But we always go to what used to be the Chart House in Malibu to celebrate our anniversary because that's where we had our first date. Now it's Mastro's on Pacific Coast Highway. And I wrote down a note here that happened during our dinner, so I'd get this right. I said, after we had enjoyed our cup of coffee and before we were leaving, I said, Sandy, just think, 43 years ago, we were living in a cheap apartment. I was driving a used Chevy. We slept on a hard sofa bed and watched a 10-inch black and white television. And back then, I was living with a 30-something. And today, we live in a lovely English Tudor home in Calabasas. And we each drive nice new automobiles. We sleep on a huge oversized bed and watch TV on a huge plasma screen television. But the difference, and this is where I made up, I screwed up. I said, but the difference is now I'm living with a 70-something. But I said, I still love you more than ever, but time changes everything, doesn't it? Well, it's the first time I'd ever heard her call me Buster. She said in no uncertain terms, well, Buster, that may be true, dear, but consider this. If you ever feel compelled to find yourself a new 30-something, you do that, and I'll make damn sure that once again you'll be living in a cheap apartment, driving a beat-up Chevy, sleeping on a hard sofa bed, and watching a 10-inch black and white television. Our wives really know how to get to the chase, don't they? That's my introduction. Thank you, Sandy, for living with me all these years.
Well, I think everybody, wants to get things started. You want to get after it? All right. One of the things that all of us in radio or any profession have done, we want to know how we got started. And I knew you knew even as a kid that you wanted to be on radio, right, Wink?
Yeah, from the time I was old enough to know what a microphone was. Somebody said, some wise sage once said a long time ago, if you can find a job you like, you will never have to work a day in your life. And they must have had me in mind because I always wanted to be on radio. I got really interested in radio when I used to come home after grammar school and listen to soap operas with my mom. She would listen to Stella Dallas and When a Girl Marries and Lorenzo Jones and his wife Belle and all those afternoon soaps, and that really got me into it. And so she understood more than my dad or my siblings did about my love for radio and eventually television. And this little table right here in front of me is a table I made at Vacation Bible School when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I made it for my mom. And later, she let me cut a hole in it. And I bought one of those cheap turntables, and I inserted it in there. And this is what I used to play radio for the first time in my life. I would spend all of my money. I was then a soda jerk at Baker's Drug Store in downtown Jackson, and I also carried a Jackson Sun paper route in the afternoon. But I'd spend all my money on 78 RPM records. And it was hard to turn this thing on and hold a 78 RPM without it sliding across, But I made it work. And my daughters knew this story. And my mother still had this, God bless her soul. And they were back there about 5 or 6 years ago visiting the old home place. And they found this. This was the crystal microphone that I sent off for, my very first microphone. and they had this attached, and they, unbeknownst to me, brought this back on the airplane. I don't know how they did it, and they fixed it all up, and they had it inscribed, "A symbol of humble beginnings, a young boy's dream realized and surpassed." And that is really what got me started in radio.
I love that. Well, we all grew up reading Life magazine, and there was a pictorial that taught a lot about how to sell a commercial on radio in the later years. Now, talk to us about that.
Well, my dad was a lumber inspector, and so you'll know up front, we didn't have a lot of money. We weren't poor, but what we didn't have, we didn't know we didn't have anyway, so it didn't matter, you know. I knew that there were some people who lived across on the other side of town that had a hell of a lot more than we did, but we got by, and we always had clean clothes, and we always had 3 meals a day. So we were in good shape. And my dad, as a lumber inspector at a company called Wood Mosaic, every Christmas would get a $100 check. That was his bonus for Christmas. But in addition to that $100, they gave him a year's subscription to Life magazine. So I grew up reading Life magazine my entire life. And because of my interest in radio, I used to tear out the advertisements in Life magazine, and I'd go into the back bedroom of our little 3-bedroom house, close the door, and pretend I was on the radio. And I would take those pages of commercials, and I would pretend I was doing this on the radio. And so it helped me a lot because, to a degree, it helped me to ad-lib, and it helped me to hopefully sell a commercial. And nobody understood me doing that. They thought I was crazy, meaning my siblings. But my mom, who remembered this, she's the only one who really and truly understood. But that's the way I got started, reading Life magazine for my entire life.
Moms are beautiful.
Moms are good.
My mom was a radio fan too. But now listen, let's talk about your first job. Your first job in radio was in 1951. That was 67 years ago. Now, do you remember the first day on the air? You were a 17-year-old kid. Tell us about that.
Well, as I said, I always wanted to be in radio. And my Sunday school teacher at Lambeth Memorial Methodist Church happened to be the manager of the 250 water in Jackson, WPLI. We had 3 stations, 250 water, 1,000 water, WTJS, and a 5,000 water, WDXI. And as it so happened, I'd moved from one station to the other before I went to Memphis. But I used to bug my Sunday school teacher. His name was Chick Wingate. And every time I'd see him, whether it was at church or anywhere I'd meet him on the street, "Chick, when are you going to give me a job? I want to be on the radio." And he would just sort of fluff it off. But one night, you know, every little town has, Jackson was a town of about 25,000 people in those days, and every little town has its town home square. And I was sitting there on the railing of the First National Bank one summer night with Dickie Bear and Charlie Pate, who were 2 of my high school football buddies. And we were just talking, killing time. Must have been about 8:30 or 9 o'clock. And up pulls, remember, anybody in the room old enough to remember the old Henry J automobile? Well, Chick Wingate pulls up in his little Henry J. And this was my night, because the radio station was the 4th floor of that bank building, and he was coming to do some late night work. I said, "Chick," as I said many times before, "when are you going to give me it?" She said, "Damn it, come on." Just to get rid of me, I guess. He took me upstairs, 4th floor, went into the radio station, ripped off some Associated Press newswire copy and a couple of commercials, gave them to me, sat me in front of a microphone, and turned on the tape recorder. Little did he know that I had been practicing all these years with Life magazine. So I pretty much knocked him off his keister. I went through those commercials like Grant going through Richmond. And I've always been fond of my reading, and I've always thought I was a pretty good reader, so the news was no problem, and I kept up with the news. And so when it was over, he said, "Here's what you do. You come down here tomorrow after school." I was 17, graduating that year, 1951. He said, "You come down here tomorrow after school. I'll have the mayor here." Mayor George Smith owned that radio station. He said, "I'll have Mayor Smith here, and we'll do this for him. And if you are liked by the mayor and what he hears, you got a job. So I couldn't wait till the next day. And I got down to WPLI on the 4th floor of the First National Bank building, quick as I possibly could. And I was on a bicycle. And I auditioned for the mayor. He loved what he heard. He hired me, gave me $25 a week, and that was my beginning in radio. And then while I was at WPLI, since I'd played football for the high school team, I was never first string. I was always second string quarterback, but I tried. And I knew all the players. And they said, how would you like to do some play-by-play? So I did play-by-play football and play-by-play basketball that year at WPLI, in addition to being a regular announcer, doing the news, and sweeping the place out at night. Whatever needed to be done, I did it. Well, after that first year, WTJS, the 1000 water, came calling with $45 a week, and I went to WTJS. And that could have been almost the undoing of my radio career. Because one night on the air, I did the night shift. One night on the air on WTJS, I had read the 10 o'clock news and had flubbed it pretty well. And I got to 10:15, and we had those turntables where the commercials were on the big discs, and you played them at 33 1/3.
Yeah.
Well, I happened to play one at 78 RPM. It was a beer commercial. And the board was an RCA board where you first had to turn off your speaker and then turn on your mic. Well, I forgot to turn off the speaker or the microphone. And I said, God damn, what the shit's gonna happen next?
Oh, no!
It's exactly what I said. And then I realized what I had done. And at 10:30, when I hit the network with the show called Dream Harbor, I got one telephone call. It happened to be the executive secretary to the general manager and owner of the 5,000 watt station, WDXI. Her name was Ruth O'Neill. I don't know how I remember these names. Some days I can't remember my name. But Ruth O'Neill called, and she said, sir, I answered the phone. She said, sir, you better tell an announcer that he's cursing on the air. I said, yes, ma'am, I sure will tell him. I sure will tell him. And I called the transmitter, because we had engineers at the transmitter in those days.
Yes.
And I said, did you hear that? He said, I didn't. No, I didn't. He lied, but I didn't hear anything. Everything's fine. The only other person that I ever heard that heard me say that was my sister, Geraldine, Jerry, who had a date that night, and they were driving around, and they heard me say that. But outside of them, I never heard any more. I had heard about something called the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, and I knew essentially what they were and what they did. And I thought, this is it. I mean, I've wanted to be in radio all my life, and this is going to kill my career. But fortunately, even the management of the radio station never uttered one word about it. So I went from WTJS the following year to WDXI, and I was at the 5,000 water and did the afternoon show and became really, that was my best job in local radio, because all the kids in town knew me, and I did a 6:30 program from the black and white stores in Jackson. The black and white stores at your request. And they would call in requests on the telephone. Those were fun days on radio. Makes no sense today and wouldn't, but I got to do, and that was the most popular radio show in Jackson. So I got to do that, and I got to a point, and again, I was still doing play-by-play football and basketball at all three stations. And it got to the point where I wanted to move on to my dream job at my dream station.
Yes.
And that was WHBQ in Memphis. And I thought, how do I go about doing this? Well, one Sunday afternoon, I surreptitiously came to the radio station. And while nobody else was there except the announcer on duty, I did an audition for WHBQ, which I sent to Gordon Lawhead, the program director, thinking I probably would never hear anything. And it just so happened, I'm kind of like my wife, Sandy. I don't throw many things away. And I happened to have a
that's
few
great.
seconds of that audition.
Are we going to hear it?
You're going to hear it. And I tell you what, you're going to hear a guy trying to sound like a radio announcer. That's the way, you know. I thought you got to throw your voice down here. And, that's when my voice was not nearly as low as it is now. I was trying to copy the style of my hero at WHBQ in the afternoon. He did a show called Covington's Corner, and he was a terrific guy with a great voice. His name was Dick Covington. And I tried to sound like him. And then, first of all, you'll hear me do a bit of a commercial. We'll play as much of this as I can take, and then we'll just cut it off. Okay?
This is Dixie, WDXI, Jackson, Tennessee. At Hudson's Radio and Record Shop, 308 East Lafayette Street in Jackson, you can choose from the complete line of the famous RCA Victor radios, records, record players, and television sets. See the new RCA Super Sets with new picture power that give unequal performance even under the roughest reception conditions. You get sharper picture detail, matchless golden throat tone system, a complete choice of beautiful cabinet styles, and when UHF is ready, your RCA Victor Super Set can easily be adapted. Remember, more people own RCA Victor than any other make.
This is me being Dick Covington.
Yay, hello there. How are you this fine, sunshiny afternoon? We got music for you for the next hour and a half. A little thing we call Dixie Platter Time. Every day at the same time we come on the airways, real big. 2:30 it is, too. Records all at your request.
Okay, that's enough of that.
Yes,
Take
Rita
that.
Bombshell.
That's all I can take. I know I could. That probably would have gotten me a job at K-Earth 101. All right, Johnny?
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. I can already feel the excitement building for our next Hollywood Media Professional Celebrity Showcase.